Actually, the first show that I played was the Ohio State Fair with about 20,000 people, and I was extremely frightened.
For decades, Ricky Nelson was the golden boy of American entertainment. The clean-cut teen idol who grew up on national television, charmed millions with his effortless voice, and seemed destined for a life free of scandal. But now, all these years later, newly uncovered details about his final years and the truth behind his mysterious downfall have stunned Hollywood in ways no one ever expected. What insiders are finally revealing paints a far more complicated, emotional, and heartbreaking picture than anyone imagined. And for the first time, people are being urged to listen closely. Behind the polished smile and chart-topping hits, Ricky Nelson was carrying battles that he kept painfully private. According to those who knew him best, there were signs. Subtle changes, quiet warnings, and troubling moments that hinted something was deeply wrong behind the scenes. These revelations, long buried or overlooked, are now coming to light, and they are rewriting everything fans thought they knew about the beloved star. Even more shocking are the accounts from friends, producers, and crew members who claim that Ricky's final months were marked by events far more dramatic than the public ever saw. Unreleased recordings, hidden journal entries, and testimonies from those closest to him paint a picture of a man fighting to regain control over a life slipping away from him. And the truth behind what really happened on that tragic final night is even more haunting than the rumors suggested. Hollywood is stunned. Fans are heartbroken, and the legacy of Ricky Nelson is now being viewed through a completely different lens. These new details change everything, and they raise questions that have lingered for nearly 4 decades. Ricky Nelson was born into America's first true TV family, a child star raised under the bright, relentless glow of studio lights. From the moment he appeared on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, audiences saw him as the boy who had everything: fame, talent, charm, and a future that seemed paved with gold. But behind that perfect image was a young man struggling to define himself in an industry that rarely allowed him to simply be human. And as new details emerge today, Hollywood is finally reckoning with the truth about what he endured. Throughout his teenage years, Ricky achieved an extraordinary level of fame that few could comprehend. His transition from TV star to chart-topping singer was seamless on the surface, but insiders now reveal it wasn't as effortless as it appeared. According to newly surfaced accounts from early studio engineers and producers, Ricky was under constant pressure to perform, to replicate hits, and to maintain the pristine image that America adored. He was incredibly talented, one producer explained in a recently resurfaced interview, but he was also incredibly lonely. People forget that he grew up in front of the camera. He didn't get to figure himself out the way regular kids did. This loneliness, paired with the pressure of being a cultural icon, set the stage for many of the struggles that would follow him into adulthood. Hollywood insiders who have now come forward describe Ricky as someone who was always chasing approval. From his parents, from the public, from the industry that had shaped him since childhood. He rarely voiced it, but those closest to him say the weight of expectation was crushing. As he matured and the music landscape shifted, Ricky found himself battling something he never expected: fading relevance. The British invasion changed everything, and although he continued recording and performing, he was no longer the unstoppable force he once was. What's now being revealed paints this period not as a gentle decline, but as a deeply painful transition. In private letters and journal entries that have only recently become public through family archives, Ricky expressed fears of being forgotten. He wrote about the disconnect between the man he wanted to be and the persona the world expected him to maintain. "I don't know who they want anymore," he wrote in one heartbreaking passage. "I'm trying to keep up, but every direction I turn feels like the wrong one." During this time, financial pressures also mounted. Despite his fame, Ricky dealt with mismanagement, costly divorces, and an expensive lifestyle he was expected to uphold. Insiders now confirm that Ricky took on grueling touring schedules, not simply out of passion for music, but out of necessity. Yet through all of this, Ricky remained dedicated to his craft. He continued writing, recording and performing with a sincerity that fans still cherish. But beneath the surface there were signs, subtle but unmistakable, that the emotional strain was wearing him down. Crew members from his later tours recall moments of visible exhaustion, quiet moments when he seemed lost in thought, and instances where his friendly demeanor masked deeper pain. Looking back now, those closest to him realized that these were cries for help no one fully understood at the time, and as new accounts emerge from people who witnessed Ricky's final years, it's becoming clear that the story of his decline is far more tragic, far more human, and far more misunderstood than the world ever realized. As Ricky Nelson entered his late 30s and early 40s, his life took on a duality that few outside his inner circle could see. On stage, he still embodied the easygoing charm that had defined his youth. Off stage, however, he was navigating a growing storm, one shaped by financial strain, complicated relationships, and a desperate attempt to reclaim control over his own narrative. Newly revealed details from those who toured, worked, and lived alongside him show a man caught between the expectations of his past and the harsh realities of his present. By the early 1980s, Ricky was touring extensively, sometimes performing over 200 nights a year. At a glance, it appeared he was simply a dedicated musician who loved being on the road. But insiders now confirm something much more troubling. Ricky was touring that aggressively because he had to. Years of mismanaged money, combined with a high-profile divorce and rising personal expenses, had left him financially vulnerable. People close to him now admit that Ricky often seemed trapped, keeping up a grueling schedule that was taking a physical and emotional toll. According to several former bandmates, this was when Ricky began to show signs of exhaustion that went far deeper than fatigue. He would finish a show, step off stage to applause, and then retreat into long, quiet moments where he seemed disconnected from everything around him. It wasn't depression you could see from the outside, one longtime crew member explained. It was more like a man who'd been carrying a heavy load for so long he didn't know how to set it down. There were also tensions within his professional circle. Newly resurfaced accounts describe disagreements over musical direction, conflicts with promoters, and frustrations about how he was being marketed. Ricky wanted to evolve. He wanted to be seen as more than the teen idol of the 1950s, but industry gatekeepers, clinging to the image that made him famous, resisted these changes. That push and pull created a strain he rarely discussed publicly, but which grew heavier with each passing year. Then came a series of events that, in hindsight, revealed just how vulnerable Ricky had become. Close friends have spoken about the emotional toll of his divorce from Chris Harmon, which affected him far more deeply than most people ever realized. The custody battles, the public scrutiny, the financial fallout, it all added to a growing weight that was slowly eroding his sense of stability. In private, Ricky expressed fears about losing not only his career, but his identity. Newly uncovered notes from conversations with friends show a man who felt misunderstood and underappreciated. "People think I'm still that kid from TV," he reportedly said during one late-night tour bus conversation. "But I'm not. I'm older, I'm smarter, and I want to be taken seriously." Yet even in these vulnerable moments, Ricky remained outwardly kind, gentle, and dedicated to his fans. Those who toured with him often describe him as deeply generous, someone who always made time for a handshake, a smile, or a sincere thank you. It's one of the reasons these new revelations hit so hard. The world is only now realizing how much pain he was masking behind that polite, famously soft-spoken demeanor. What few people knew at the time was that Ricky was trying to stage a comeback. He was writing new music, exploring a more mature sound, and hoping to create an album that would redefine him for a new generation. Those who heard early demos say the songs were introspective, emotional, and some of the strongest work he had produced in years. Sadly, much of this material never saw the light of day. As these new details emerge, Hollywood is now forced to acknowledge a reality it long overlooked. Ricky Nelson was fighting battles no one took the time to see. And the deeper these revelations go, the clearer it becomes that his final months were far more complicated and far more heartbreaking than the public ever knew. As Ricky Nelson moved into the final chapter of his life, the pressure, exhaustion, and quiet struggles he had endured for years began to collide in ways that even those closest to him didn't fully grasp at the time. Newly revealed testimonies from bandmates, flight crew members, and friends have offered a clearer, more heartbreaking picture of his last months, one marked by determination, frustration, and a sense of urgency that now feels tragically significant. In late 1985, Ricky was preparing for a New Year's Eve performance in Dallas. On the surface, the tour seemed like another chance for him to reconnect with fans, rebuild momentum, and finally push forward with the new musical direction he had long hoped to pursue. But insiders now say that Ricky was under tremendous emotional strain leading up to this stretch of shows. Financial pressures were still mounting, and he was desperately trying to keep his career afloat while feeling increasingly misunderstood by the industry. Bandmates from that final tour have since shared details that were never publicly known. They describe Ricky as unusually reflective during their downtime, quiet, tired, and often lost in thought. He would sit with his guitar for hours, tinkering with melodies that he hoped would someday become part of his long-planned comeback album. But even when surrounded by his team, he carried a heaviness that no one truly knew how to address. He wasn't sad all the time, one musician clarified years later. But there was a weight on him. You could feel it. Then came the revelations about the aircraft Ricky had chartered, a plane that, according to later reports and first-hand accounts, had been giving warning signs for months. Band members and maintenance workers would later reveal that the aircraft was notorious for mechanical issues. Ricky himself reportedly expressed concerns about its condition, but with finances tight and time short, he had few options. Notably, new documents and testimonies that weren't widely shared until much later indicate that the plane should never have been approved for long-distance travel. These details have shocked Hollywood today, reopening questions about oversight, maintenance, and whether Ricky was unknowingly stepping into danger long before the final flight even took off. Crew members involved in earlier tours now recall moments when Ricky appeared uneasy about the aircraft, but was reassured by others who insisted everything was fine. Tragically, he trusted the wrong people. As the plane took off on December 31st, 1985, Ricky was reportedly in an optimistic mood. Quiet, yes, but hopeful. He had spoken to close friends about turning a new page in the coming year. He wanted to release new music, reconnect with his family, and finally break free from the pressures that had weighed on him for so long. This mixture of sadness and hope would become a haunting detail in the years that followed. The tragic fire that consumed the aircraft mid-flight ended not only Ricky's life, but also the hopeful chapter he had been fighting so hard to enter. And now, decades later, new technical reports, overlooked witness statements, and long-silenced testimonies from crew and investigators have painted a far more complex picture of what may have caused the disaster. Many of these details are only now being publicly acknowledged, and they suggest that a series of preventable issues, neglect, poor oversight, and mechanical failure may have contributed far more heavily than once believed. For those who loved Ricky, these revelations are painful. They remind the world that behind the legend was a man who endured relentless struggles, carried enormous emotional burdens, and yet continued to push forward with grace, humility, and unwavering dedication to his craft. As these new details continue to surface, they reshape the story of Ricky Nelson not as a polished teen idol frozen in time, but as a complex, resilient human being whose final months were filled with far more turmoil and vulnerability than the public ever realized. In the aftermath of Ricky Nelson's tragic death, the world mourned the loss of a beloved entertainer. But as the decades passed, new voices, long-shelved reports, and private testimonies from people who were silenced or ignored at the time have come forward, revealing a far deeper, more unsettling truth about what happened before, during, and even after that fatal flight. These revelations have shaken Hollywood, not just because of what they expose about Ricky's final hours, but because of what they say about the pressures, failures, and negligence surrounding him. In the early days after the crash, theories spread like wildfire. Media outlets were quick to publish sensational claims, many of which were later proven to be inaccurate or exaggerated. But while much of the speculation was unfounded, investigators now admit that certain critical details were quietly pushed aside. Newly released documentation suggests that the aircraft was plagued with electrical issues long before that final takeoff. Some who worked on the plane later acknowledged that the wiring system was old, unreliable, and dangerously overdue for replacement. These new revelations paint a portrait not of a spontaneous accident, but of a tragedy waiting to happen. Hollywood, accustomed to rumors and myths, is now reckoning with the fact that Ricky Nelson may have been the victim of systemic carelessness. An oversight that, had it been addressed sooner, might have saved his life and the lives of those traveling with him. But perhaps the most heartbreaking details come not from investigators or industry insiders, but from the people who knew Ricky best. Friends and family now say that in the days leading up to his final flight, Ricky had been unusually hopeful, not cheerful, hopeful. After years of struggling with finances, identity, and the shadow of his early fame, he felt he was finally on the edge of a breakthrough. He had spoken openly about the new direction he wanted to take his music. He wanted to reconnect with his children. He had even considered stepping away from the constant pressure of touring to focus on writing and rebuilding his life. From the inside out, those close to him now describe his final days as a bittersweet mix of exhaustion and optimism. He knew he was worn down. He knew he had been carrying pain, years, not months, of emotional weight. But he was finally ready to make changes he had long avoided. In private conversations, Ricky admitted that he wanted 1986 to be a turning point. He had new songs, new goals, and a desire to redefine himself not as the teen idol of the past, but as the seasoned, soulful musician he had grown into. These revelations only deepen the tragedy of what happened next. For years, fans saw Ricky Nelson as the polished star they grew up with, unaware of the personal battles he fought or the quiet strength he carried. But now, with new details emerging, a fuller picture of the man behind the fame is finally coming to light. He was resilient. He was gentle. He worked harder than the world ever realized, all while facing pressures that would have broken many others. Hollywood is stunned because these revelations force a re-examination of the narrative so many accepted for decades. Ricky Nelson didn't fade away. He didn't give up. He wasn't simply a fallen star from a bygone era. He was a man clawing his way toward a comeback, fighting for a new chapter, even as forces outside his control closed in around him. Today, these new details honor his truth. They remind us that Ricky Nelson was not just an icon, he was human. He was flawed, hopeful, determined, and deserving of far more protection and understanding than he ever received. And as these long-buried revelations continue to surface, his legacy becomes richer, more complex, and infinitely more meaningful. If you want, I can also create a dramatic YouTube outro, a thumbnail text, or a short version for shorts. Just tell me what you need.